My name is Vivian Jackson, and I discovered my daughter-in-law kissing my husband on our 45th wedding anniversary. Time seemed to stop in that moment. The scent of expensive perfume and betrayal hung heavy in the hallway outside our bedroom. I stood frozen, the echo of laughter from our anniversary party still ringing from downstairs. 45 years of marriage, and this is what it had come to. I watched as Vanessa pressed her lips against Harold's, slow and deliberate. Her eyes flicked toward the doorway, catching mine. She wanted me to see this. She pulled back, dabbing her crimson lipstick from the corner of his mouth with a napkin. My napkin. The one with my initials that I had hand-embroidered 20 years ago. My husband lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes, pretending to straighten his tie. Vanessa smiled at me, a victor savoring her triumph. I should have screamed. I should have thrown something. I should have fallen apart right there in the hallway, while our friends and family celebrated downstairs, oblivious to the destruction happening above them. Instead, something strange happened inside me. A calm clarity washed over me, as if I were watching the scene from outside my body. My heart hammered in my chest, but my mind turned crystalline and sharp. I smiled. "Dessert is ready downstairs," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Chocolate cake with raspberry filling, your favorite Harold." Vanessa's smile faltered just for a second. This wasn't the reaction she had expected. Harold mumbled something about being down in a minute, still unable to look at me. I turned and walked back downstairs to our guests, my steps measured and calm. Inside, something had shifted. A switch had flipped. The woman who had entered that hallway was not the same one who left it. Our living room was filled with faces I had known for decades. Marcus, our son, was regaling our neighbors with a story about little Elijah's first day of kindergarten. My grandson sat on his lap, half asleep, despite the noise around him. Seeing them, I felt a pang so sharp it nearly took my breath away. This wasn't just about me. This betrayal threatened everything I held dear. "There you are, Vivian," called Estelle, my oldest friend. "We're ready for that famous cake of yours." I served cake. I poured coffee. I laughed at jokes and accepted congratulations on 45 years of marriage. All while my husband and his lover eventually returned to the party, standing on opposite sides of the room as if nothing had happened. Hours passed in this strange, suspended reality. I moved through it like an actress who had thoroughly rehearsed her role. When the last guest finally left Marcus carrying a sleeping Elijah to the car, with Vanessa following behind, I began quietly cleaning up. Harold stood awkwardly in the doorway to the kitchen. "I'll help you with the dishes," he offered, his voice rough. "No need," I replied, not looking up from the sink. "You must be tired. Go on up to bed." He hesitated, then nodded, and left. I listened to his footsteps on the stairs, the familiar creak of the third step from the top, the soft closing of our bedroom door. Only then did I allow myself to stop. I dried my hands on a dish towel and walked back into the dining room. There, discarded in a small decorative trash bin, was the napkin Vanessa had used to wipe away her lipstick. The napkin with my initials, VJ, that had been part of a set my mother had given me when Harold and I married. I picked it up carefully, unfolding it to reveal the crimson smear across the delicate fabric. I didn't crumple it or throw it away. Instead, I smoothed it out, folded it neatly, and walked to my small office at the end of the hall. From the desk drawer, I took out a leather journal, the kind with a lock that Marcus had given me for Christmas years ago, but I had never used. I placed the napkin inside, closed the journal, and locked it. "The game has just begun," I whispered to the empty room. Outside, the Atlanta night was warm and heavy with the scent of the roses I had tended for decades. The prize-winning Jackson roses, famous throughout the neighborhood for their deep red blooms and surprising hardiness. As a child, my father had taught me that the most beautiful roses grew among the sharpest thorns, a lesson I was about to relearn. I slept in the guest room that night, telling Harold I didn't want to wake him when I came to bed. The truth was, I couldn't bear to lie beside him to smell Vanessa's perfume that surely lingered on his skin. I stared at the ceiling until dawn broke, not crying, not raging, but thinking, planning, remembering. The next morning, I rose early and made coffee as I had done every day for 45 years. Harold came down in his bathrobe, hesitant and wary. "Vivian, about last night." "Cream, no sugar," I said, sliding his coffee across the counter just the way he liked it. "There are blueberry muffins in the oven." He stared at me, confusion clouding his eyes. I had given him no opening, no chance to offer excuses or apologies. Perhaps he had prepared a speech overnight. Perhaps he had convinced himself it was a momentary weakness, a mistake never to be repeated. Or perhaps he had planned to tell me it was over, that he and Vanessa had fallen in love. Whatever his plan, my calm demeanor had derailed it. Harold Sullivan had spent 45 years knowing exactly how I would react in any situation. Predictable, steady Vivian. The woman who had given up her career as an educator to raise their son, who had stood by him as he built his real estate business, who had never caused a scene or made demands. This new Vivian, this woman who smiled and served coffee as if nothing had happened, was a stranger to him. "I have a meeting with the garden club this morning," I said, checking my watch. "The summer showcase is next week." Harold nodded slowly, taking his coffee with a murmured thanks. As I gathered my purse and keys, the phone rang. I answered it, expecting Estelle with last-minute garden club details. "Mrs. Jackson, this is Jasmine Lewis, Vanessa's younger sister. We'd never been close. She'd attended family gatherings but always seemed uncomfortable, like she didn't quite fit in Vanessa's carefully curated world." "Jasmine, good morning," I said, turning away from Harold's curious gaze. "Is everything all right?" There was a long pause. Then Jasmine's voice came again, lower this time. "I can't take it anymore, Mrs. Jackson. I have to tell you the truth." My hand tightened on the receiver, but I kept my voice even. "Take a breath, Jasmine. What's going on?" The words tumbled out in a rush. "They've been seeing each other for months. Harold and Vanessa. I saw them together at the Riverside Hotel last week." Her voice cracked. "They were holding hands in the restaurant, and then they went upstairs together. To a room. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Jackson. I know I should have told you sooner, but Vanessa's my sister, and I don't know what I thought." The world seemed to freeze again just for a moment. Despite what I had seen with my own eyes the night before, hearing confirmation that this wasn't a one-time indiscretion, but a lengthy affair cut deep. "Are you certain, Jasmine? Could you be mistaken?" "I wish I was," she replied miserably. "But there's more. Vanessa's been talking about your house, about how perfect it would be once you were gone. She told me Harold promised they could live there together, that they'd redecorate everything." I closed my eyes, absorbing this new blow. Our home. The Jackson family home, built on land my grandfather had purchased in the 1920s, when few black families could buy property in this part of Atlanta. The home where I had raised my son, tended my garden, built a life. "Thank you for telling me, Jasmine," I said finally. "I appreciate your honesty." When I hung up, Harold was watching me, eyes narrowed. "Who was that, just garden club business?" I replied, picking up my purse. "I'll be back this afternoon." I didn't go to the garden club meeting. Instead, I drove to a small coffee shop across town, one Harold and I never frequented. I ordered a cup of tea and sat in a corner booth, opening a fresh notebook I'd purchased at the drugstore on my way. At the top of the first page, I wrote the date and Jasmine Lewis's call, followed by every detail she'd shared, times, dates, descriptions of what she'd seen. Then I began making a list of all the small things I'd noticed over the past months but had chosen to ignore. Harold working late more often, strange charges on credit card statements for restaurants we never visited, Vanessa dropping by unannounced when Harold was home, the amber perfume I'd detected on his collar twice in the past month, his sudden interest in changing our will and life insurance policies. As I wrote, a terrible clarity began to emerge. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated plan. When had it started? When Vanessa married Marcus 5 years ago, or had it begun later, evolving from some imagined slight or growing resentment? Marcus, my son, did he suspect anything? Was he another victim in their scheme, or somehow complicit? No. I refused to believe that. Marcus adored his son Elijah, and despite occasional tensions in their marriage, he seemed devoted to Vanessa. He worshipped his father too, having followed Harold into the real estate business. The thought of him discovering this betrayal made my heart ache. I closed the notebook and slipped it into my purse. This wasn't just about a faithless husband and a scheming daughter-in-law. This was about protecting what was mine, what rightfully belonged to the Jackson family. If Harold and Vanessa thought they could simply push me aside and take everything I'd spent a lifetime building, they were sorely mistaken. That afternoon, I visited the safe deposit box I maintained at a bank downtown, one Harold knew nothing about. Inside was my birth certificate, my parents' marriage license, and the original copy of my father's will, including the trust documents for the Jackson family property. My father, ever cautious after a lifetime of seeing black families lose their land and homes through legal maneuvering, had created an ironclad trust. The property would remain in the Jackson family bloodline only. No spouse could claim it in a divorce. No creditor could seize it for debts. "Land is the only thing they can't make more of, Vivian," he'd told me when I was young. "Hold on to it. It's your legacy, your security, your children's future." I made copies of the trust documents and returned the originals to the safe deposit box. On my way home, I called an old friend from my teaching days, Angela Davis, who had gone on to become a family court judge. "Angela, I need the name of the best divorce attorney in Atlanta, someone who specializes in cases involving older women." There was a pause. "Vivian Jackson, are you and Harold having problems?" "You could say that," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I just need someone to help me understand my options." "Call Amara Johnson," Angela said immediately. "She's built her practice around protecting older women from financial exploitation. I've seen her take down some very powerful men." I thanked her and made a note of the name. Back at home, Harold was nowhere to be found. A note on the kitchen counter said he had a late meeting with clients. I checked his calendar on the family computer, finding no such appointment listed. Another lie. I added it to my notebook. That night, I began a careful inventory of our finances. Harold had always handled the money, a traditional arrangement I'd never questioned. I had my own checking account for household expenses, but our investments, retirement accounts, and property deeds were all in Harold's office files. While he was out with his clients with Vanessa, I now presumed I went to his home office and began a systematic search. Most files were locked away, but I found the spare key in the ceramic dish on his bookshelf where it had always been kept. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Our joint accounts had been systematically drained over the past 3 months, with large transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. The deed to our vacation cabin in the mountains had been transferred solely to Harold's name. A provisional will dated just 2 weeks earlier left everything to Harold with a small stipend for me, with Vanessa named as the executor should Harold die first. I photographed every document with my phone, careful to return everything exactly as I found it. Then I sat in his leather desk chair, looking around at the office that had been his domain for decades. On the wall hung a photo of us on our wedding day, young and beaming with hope. Beside it, a more recent photo of Harold with Marcus and Elijah at last year's fishing trip. The life we had built was a fraud. The man I had loved for nearly half a century was a stranger. Yet somehow I felt no tears. The pain was there, a constant ache beneath my ribs, but overshadowing it was a cold, crystalline anger. The same clarity I had felt when I caught them kissing had returned sharper now and focused to a fine point. I would not be discarded. I would not be erased from my own life story. And I would certainly not allow the Jackson family home to fall into the hands of the woman who had betrayed both me and my son. The next morning, I called Amara Johnson's office and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon. Harold left early, another fabricated meeting his excuse. I dressed carefully in a navy blue suit I'd worn when I was still a school principal, applied light makeup, and drove downtown to the offices of Johnson & Associates. Amara Johnson was younger than I expected, perhaps 35, with close-cropped natural hair and keen, intelligent eyes. Her office was functional, rather than flashy, with certificates and awards covering one wall. "Mrs. Jackson," she said, rising to shake my hand, "please have a seat and tell me what brings you here today." I placed my leather journal on her desk, along with the folder containing my photographs of Harold's documents. "My husband of 45 years is having an affair with our daughter-in-law, and they appear to be systematically stripping me of my assets in preparation for divorcing me." Amara's expression didn't change, but she leaned forward slightly. "I see. And you have evidence of this?" Over the next hour, I laid out everything I had discovered, from the witnessed kiss to Jasmine's confirmation of the ongoing affair to the financial documents and property transfers. Amara took detailed notes, occasionally asking for clarification. When I showed her the trust documents for the Jackson family property, her eyes lit up. "This is excellent, Mrs. Jackson. This trust is exceptionally well drafted. According to these terms, if your marriage is dissolved due to infidelity, not only does the property remain entirely yours, but all assets derived from the property, including your husband's business, which I note was initially funded by a mortgage on the property, revert to you as well." She leaned back, a small, satisfied smile playing at her lips. "In other words, Mrs. Jackson, your father built you a safety net that your husband and daughter-in-law cannot dismantle, no matter how hard they try." For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. "What do I do now?" I asked. "First, we continue gathering evidence. The eyewitness account from Ms. Lewis is good, but we'll need more. Financial records showing unusual patterns, any communication between your husband and daughter-in-law that suggests impropriety." Amara tapped her pen against her notepad. "Second, and this is important, you maintain the status quo at home. Do not confront your husband yet. Do not let on that you know anything." "I've been doing that since I caught them kissing," I said. Amara nodded approvingly. "Good. That gives us time to move smaller investments into your sole name to prevent further draining of assets. I'll also file papers to freeze the trust assets, temporarily, citing concerns of fraud." She studied me for a moment. "Mrs. Jackson, this won't be easy. There will be moments when you want to confront them to demand answers. But the element of surprise is our greatest weapon right now. Can you continue to play the role of the unsuspecting wife a little longer?" I thought of the cold clarity that had settled over me, the focused anger that had replaced my initial shock. "I've been an educator for 30 years, Ms. Johnson. I know how to maintain discipline in difficult situations." She smiled fully this time. "Then I believe we're going to work very well together, Mrs. Jackson." Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was Vivian Jackson, devoted wife and mother, tending my garden and preparing for the summer showcase. By night, I documented every suspicious movement, every unexplained absence, every hushed phone call Harold made from his office. I also began subtly securing my position. I updated my own will with a new attorney Amara recommended. I transferred my personal jewelry and family heirlooms to a new safe deposit box. I made copies of family photographs and important documents, storing them with my friend Estelle for the Historical Society project I claimed to be working on. Through it all, I maintained my composure. I served Harold his coffee each morning, asked about his day each evening, and slept in the guest room, claiming a persistent backache required a firmer mattress. Vanessa increased her visits, always with some flimsy pretext involving Elijah or neighborhood gossip. I welcomed her with the same warmth I'd always shown, even as I noted the calculating look in her eyes, the way she surveyed the house as if already planning renovations. "These curtains must be 20 years old, Mom," she said during one visit, running her fingers along my living room drapes. She always called me Mom, a familiarity that now felt like sandpaper on my skin. "Have you thought about updating to something more modern?" "These were hand-selected by my mother," I replied mildly. "Some things improve with age, rather than needing replacement." Her smile faltered, sensing perhaps the double meaning in my words, but she recovered quickly. "I suppose, but change can be refreshing too. Speaking of which, have you and Dad considered downsizing? This house is so much work for you now." "The Jackson family has lived in this house for 3 generations," I said, pouring her more tea. "I expect we'll be here for many more." 2 could play at this game of hidden meanings. One morning, Vanessa texted me an unusual occurrence, as she typically called or simply dropped by. "Mom, I'd love to take you to lunch today. Just us girls. I'll bring a nice bottle of wine." I stared at the message, immediately suspicious. Vanessa had never suggested lunch before, and certainly had never offered to bring wine. What was she planning? I replied with enthusiasm I didn't feel. "That sounds lovely, dear. Noon at my house, I'll make a salad to go with our wine." As I prepared for this unexpected lunch date, I recalled Amara's advice from our most recent meeting. "They're getting impatient," she had said. The financial moves we've made to protect your assets haven't gone unnoticed. They'll make a more direct move soon. What kind of move? Based on the patterns I've seen in similar cases, they'll try to establish a narrative that you're becoming forgetful or emotionally unstable, that you need help managing your affairs. I thought of the trust documents, the protection my father had built in. They can't touch the property. Not directly, but if they can convince a court you're no longer competent to manage your own affairs, Harold could be appointed your guardian, and then he would control everything, at least temporarily. The implications had chilled me. How do I prevent that? Documentation. Record conversations if Georgia law permits, which it does with one-party consent. Keep a detailed journal. And most importantly, maintain connections with friends and community members who can testify to your competence. Now preparing for lunch with Vanessa. I retrieved a small digital recorder from the desk in my office, the kind I'd once used for recording teacher evaluations. I tested it, then slipped it into the pocket of my cardigan. Vanessa arrived precisely at noon, immaculately dressed, in a designer outfit that probably cost more than most teachers made in a month. She carried a bottle of expensive Bordeaux, Harold's favorite. "Mom, you look wonderful," she gushed, air-kissing my cheek. "I thought this wine would be perfect for our girls' lunch." "How thoughtful," I replied, taking the bottle. "Harold always enjoys a good Bordeaux." A flash of something crossed her face at the mention of Harold's name, but she recovered quickly. "I know Dad has excellent taste." I led her to the dining room, where I'd set the table with my everyday china, rather than the good set. A simple salad, fresh bread, and sliced fruit awaited us. Vanessa poured the wine while chattering about Elijah's preschool and the neighborhood association's latest drama. I let her talk, responding at appropriate intervals, while the recorder in my pocket captured every word. "Mom," she said finally after her second glass of wine, "I've been wanting to talk to you about something important." "Here it comes," I thought, taking a small sip of my own wine, which I'd barely touched. "I'm worried about you," she continued, her voice dropping to a concerned murmur. "Marcus and I both are, and Dad too, of course." "Oh, why is that, dear?" "Well, you seem so tired lately, and this big house is so much work. And then there was that incident at the grocery store last month." I kept my face neutral, though inside I was seething. There had been no incident at any grocery store. This was a complete fabrication. "I'm not sure what incident you're referring to," I said mildly. Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. "The cashier said you got confused about which card to use, and then you couldn't remember your PIN. It happens to everyone sometimes, but Dad said it's not the first time." Another lie. Harold and I rarely shopped together, and I knew my PIN by heart, the same one I'd used for 15 years. "How strange," I murmured. "My memory must be playing tricks on me." Vanessa nodded eagerly. "Exactly. That's what we're concerned about. Marcus and I were talking, and we think it might be time to consider some changes." "What kind of changes?" She leaned forward, her voice honey-sweet. "There's a lovely retirement community, Magnolia Gardens, just 20 minutes from our house. Beautiful apartments, excellent care, and you'd be so close to Elijah. He'd love having his grandmother nearby." I took another small sip of wine, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably before responding. "And what would happen to this house?" "Dad says it's becoming too much to maintain," she replied smoothly. "The market is excellent right now. You could sell used some for Magnolia Gardens and have plenty left for enjoying your retirement." The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about Harold and Vanessa's affair. This was about my home, the valuable Jackson property that had appreciated enormously as Atlanta had grown around it. Property that, according to my father's trust, Harold couldn't touch without my consent, unless I was declared incompetent. "I appreciate your concern, Vanessa," I said, keeping my voice warm. "It's something to consider, certainly." Relief washed over her face. She thought I was acquiescing, or at least not fighting back. "I'm so glad you're open to it, Mom. Dad will be relieved, too. He worries about you so much." I smiled and raised my glass. "To those who think they've already won." Confusion flickered in her eyes. "I don't understand." "Just a little toast my father used to make," I said lightly. "He always said overconfidence was the first step toward defeat." Vanessa's smile faltered, then returned brittle now. Well, this isn't about winning or losing. It's about what's best for the family. Indeed it is, I agreed. Family is everything. When Vanessa left an hour later, I waited until her car disappeared down the driveway before retrieving the recorder from my pocket. I played back the conversation, satisfaction flowing through me as I heard her fabricated concerns, her pushing for the retirement home, her casual mention of selling my house. I emailed the recording to Amara with a brief message. Lunch with Vanessa today. Listen to what she's suggesting. Amara's reply came within the hour. Excellent work, Mrs. Jackson. This recording is gold. We now have evidence they're attempting to establish a false narrative about your competence. Keep gathering evidence like this, and they'll have no case whatsoever. That night, I added another entry to my journal, detailed and precise. I was no longer just documenting betrayal. I was building a case piece by careful piece. The following week, Amara called with news. We have a court date, Mrs. Jackson. The Sullivan divorce proceedings are set to begin next month. My heart stuttered. Divorce proceedings? I haven't filed for divorce. No, Amara said, her voice grim. Harold has. On grounds of irreconcilable differences. His attorney, James Bennett, contacted me this morning to arrange a meeting to discuss asset division. Despite everything I knew, everything I'd seen with my own eyes, this still felt like a physical blow. After 45 years, Harold was officially discarding me. I see, I managed. What happens now? Now we play along, Amara said. We'll meet with Bennett, review their proposed settlement, and appear to consider it. Meanwhile, our counterfiling with evidence of adultery and financial exploitation is ready to go. We'll file it the minute they think they've won. Will I have to see Harold and Vanessa at this meeting? Harold will be there with Bennett. Vanessa has no legal standing to attend, though I wouldn't put it past them to try to bring her. Amara paused. Are you ready for this, Mrs. Jackson? It's going to get ugly. I thought of my father's words about roses and thorns, about how the most beautiful blooms often came from plants with the sharpest defenses. I've been ready since the moment I saw them together, Ms. Johnson. Let's proceed. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at Bennett's downtown office. Harold moved into the guest room without explanation, and we barely spoke in the intervening days. I continued my routines, tending my garden, preparing for the showcase, keeping my detailed journal of every suspicious action. The morning of the meeting, I dressed with careful consideration, a modest but elegant navy blue dress, pearl earrings that had been my mother's low-heeled pumps. Professional, dignified, but not flashy or attention-seeking. The image of a respectable school principal, not a scorned, emotional wife. Amara met me in the lobby of Bennett's building, her briefcase in hand. Remember, no matter what they say or how provocative it might be, maintain your composure. They want you to appear emotional and unstable. I understand, I said, smoothing my skirt. I've faced down angry parents and rebellious teenagers for 3 decades. James Bennett doesn't frighten me. Bennett's office occupied half of the 32nd floor, all glass and chrome, with stunning views of the Atlanta skyline. His receptionist, a young woman with a carefully blank expression, led us to a conference room where Harold and Bennett already waited. Harold looked older somehow, the lines around his mouth deeper, his eyes avoiding mine as we entered. Bennett rose to greet us, the picture of Southern courtesy, though his smile never reached his eyes. Mrs. Jackson, Ms. Johnson, thank you for coming. Please have a seat. Amara and I sat across from them, the polished conference table between us like a moat. Bennett opened a thick folder and slid several documents toward us. We've prepared what we believe is a very generous settlement offer, he began. Mr. Sullivan is committed to ensuring you're well taken care of, Mrs. Jackson, despite the unfortunate circumstances. I didn't touch the papers. Amara picked them up, scanning them with a neutral expression. As you'll see, Bennett continued, Mr. Sullivan proposes you retain the vacation cabin in the mountains, along with a monthly support payment sufficient to maintain your standard of living. Mr. Sullivan would retain the family home in Atlanta and the business assets. I felt a cold fury rise within me, but kept my face composed. The family home was not his to retain. It had never been his. The business had been built with Jackson family money secured against the property my grandfather had purchased nearly a century ago. Amara continued reading occasionally, making notes. Finally, she looked up. "This proposal is certainly thorough, Mr. Bennett. We'll need time to review it in detail, of course." Bennett nodded magnanimously. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Though I should mention Mr. Sullivan is eager to resolve this matter quickly and amicably." "I'm sure he is," I thought, "before I can discover more of what he's been hiding." "Mrs. Jackson," Bennett addressed me directly for the first time, "I understand this must be difficult, but I hope you'll consider this offer in the spirit it's intended. Mr. Sullivan wants to ensure your comfort while allowing you both to move forward with your lives." I looked at Harold, who still couldn't meet my eyes. 45 years together, and he couldn't even face me as he tried to take everything I'd spent a lifetime building. "May I see the papers?" I asked quietly. Amara handed them to me. I read through slowly, careful to show no reaction as I took in the breathtaking audacity of what Harold and Bennett proposed. According to this settlement, I would receive the mountain cabin, the smallest of our properties, a monthly stipend barely sufficient to maintain it, and a small percentage of Harold's retirement accounts. Everything else would remain with him. There was even a clause requiring me to vacate the Atlanta home within 30 days of signing. I set the papers down and looked directly at Harold, who finally raised his eyes to meet mine. 45 years, I said softly. 45 years, and this is what it comes to. Harold had the grace to look ashamed, though he said nothing. I picked up the pen Bennett had placed before me. "Mrs. Jackson," Amara said warningly, "we haven't had time to fully review this offer." "It's all right, Ms. Johnson," I replied. "I understand exactly what's being offered." I signed my name at the bottom of the agreement, my handwriting steady and clear, as it had been when I marked student papers years ago. Bennett looked surprised, then pleased. "Well, that's excellent. I'm glad to see you're being reasonable about this, Mrs. Jackson." I stood smoothing my dress. 40 years of marriage taught me something, Mr. Bennett. When people think you're weak, that's when you can surprise them the most. As Amara and I left the conference room, I heard Harold call my name. I didn't turn around. In the elevator, Amara gave me a small approving nod. "Perfect performance, Mrs. Jackson. Now our counter-filing will hit them like a ton of bricks. They think you've surrendered, which means they'll stop being careful." I thought of the signed agreement in Bennett's hands, the smug satisfaction on his face, the relief in Harold's eyes. They believed they had won. They had no idea the game was just beginning. As Amara and I rode down in the elevator from Bennett's office, a strange lightness filled my chest. For weeks I had been walking a tightrope balancing between the appearance of ignorance and the reality of my growing knowledge. Now, with my signature on those divorce papers, a new phase had begun. "What happens next?" I asked as we reached the lobby. Amara checked her watch. "Right now, Bennett is probably calling Harold, congratulating him on how smoothly that went. They believe you've surrendered without a fight." Her lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. "Meanwhile, my associate is filing our counterpetition with evidence of adultery, financial exploitation, and attempted fraud as we speak. How long before they know? They'll be served within 48 hours. Until then, Mrs. Jackson, maintain the performance. Go home, act disappointed but resigned. Let Harold believe his plan is working." I nodded, straightening my shoulders. "I can do that." The drive home was surreal Atlanta traffic flowing around me as I contemplated the end of nearly half a century of marriage. Despite everything I now knew, despite the cold determination that had taken root inside me, grief occasionally pierced through my armor. Not for the man Harold had become, but for the man I thought I had married, for the life I had believed we shared. When I arrived home, Harold's car was already in the driveway. I hadn't expected him to beat me back. Taking a deep breath, I composed my features into a mask of dignified resignation and entered through the front door. Harold sat in the living room, a glass of bourbon in his hand, though it was barely past noon. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "Vivian." "Harold." An awkward silence stretched between us. 45 years of shared history suddenly inadequate for conversation. "Bennett says the cabin will be ready for you whenever you want to move in," he finally said. "The caretaker has been keeping it maintained." So eager to be rid of me. I wondered if Vanessa was waiting somewhere ready to move in the moment I cleared out my belongings. The thought should have hurt, but instead it fed the cold fire of my resolve. "That's very considerate," I replied, setting my purse down and moving toward the kitchen. "I'll need some time to sort through my things." Harold nodded, looking relieved that I wasn't making a scene. "Take whatever you need from the house. Furniture, dishes, whatever makes you comfortable." How generous, offering me pieces of my own home. I thought of the Jackson family china passed down through generations, the antique furniture my grandmother had salvaged during the Depression. All of it mine by right, and heritage now being offered as conciliation prizes. "Thank you," I said simply. "I'll make a list." That evening I prepared dinner as usual, though we ate in near silence. Harold attempted small talk about the weather, about the garden club showcase coming up, about anything except the divorce or the future. I responded politely but briefly, the perfect image of a woman accepting her fate with quiet dignity. After dinner, Harold retreated to his office while I cleaned the kitchen. Through the window above the sink, I could see my prize roses, their deep red blooms vivid against the gathering twilight. 3 generations of Jackson women had tended those bushes. My grandmother had planted the first ones, my mother had expanded the garden, and I had nurtured it into an award-winning display. Vanessa would probably tear them out for a swimming pool. I pushed the thought away. The garden would remain mine, along with the house and everything else. Harold just didn't know it yet. My phone buzzed with a text from Amara. "Everything filed. Maintain status quo until service of papers." And I deleted the message and continued washing dishes, my movements automatic while my mind raced ahead. Soon, very soon, the tables would turn. I just needed to hold steady for a little longer. The next morning I woke early and began making coffee, the routine so ingrained after decades that my hands moved without conscious direction. Harold appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You don't have to keep making my coffee, Vivian," he said quietly. I poured the dark liquid into his favorite mug, adding cream the way he liked it. Force of habit, I suppose. He took the mug, our fingers brushing briefly. "Vivian, I want you to know this isn't how I wanted things to end." A surge of anger rose so quickly it nearly choked me. How dare he stand in my kitchen drinking coffee I had made, pretending some regret about our marriage ending when he had been systematically betraying me with our son's wife. But I swallowed the fury, kept my face composed. "How did you want it to end, Harold?" He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I don't know. Not like this." "Not with me discovering the truth, you mean?" His head snapped up, eyes widening slightly, before he controlled his expression. "The truth? What are you talking about?" I almost laughed at his poor attempt at innocence. Instead, I simply shook my head. "It doesn't matter now, does it? The papers are signed. You got what you wanted." He opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again, taking his coffee and retreating from the kitchen. An hour later, as I was sorting through old photo albums in the living room, deciding which memories I wanted to preserve, the doorbell rang. Harold had left for work, so I answered it myself. A young man in a courier's uniform stood on the porch, an envelope in his hand. "Mrs. Vivian Sullivan." "Yes, that's me," though soon I would reclaim Jackson as my surname, erasing the last trace of Harold from my identity. "Please sign here. You've been served." My heart skipped. This was too soon. Amara had said 48 hours, but it had barely been 24 since our meeting with Bennett. With slightly trembling hands, I signed the courier's electronic pad and took the envelope. As soon as he left, I tore it open, my eyes scanning the legal documents inside. It wasn't our counter-petition. It was something else entirely. A petition for guardianship filed by Harold Sullivan, claiming I was suffering from deteriorating mental capacity and inability to manage personal affairs, and requesting the court appoint him as my legal guardian. The room seemed to tilt around me. I sat down heavily on the nearest chair, reading through the document again more slowly. According to this petition, I had been exhibiting signs of cognitive decline for months, forgetting appointments, getting confused about financial matters, having mood swings, all lies, of course, but crafted to sound plausible for a woman my age. And there were affidavits attached, one from Harold, one from our family doctor, who I had seen exactly once in the past year, for a routine physical, and most devastating of all, one from Vanessa. My daughter-in-law's statement described in sympathetic, concerned detail how she had observed my confusion and disorientation during our recent lunch, how I had forgotten previous conversations about moving to Magnolia Gardens, how I seemed unable to follow complex discussions. I felt sick. This had been their plan all along, not just divorce, but a complete erasure of my autonomy. If Harold became my guardian, he would control everything: my money, my property, my very freedom. The divorce settlement I'd signed would be meaningless, as I would be legally incompetent to have signed it. With shaking fingers, I called Amara. "Mrs. Jackson, is everything all right?" "They've served me papers," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Not our counterpetition. Harold is filing for guardianship. He's claiming I'm mentally incompetent." There was a sharp intake of breath, then Amara's voice tight with controlled anger. "I was afraid they might try something like this. The timing makes sense now. They rushed to get you to sign that settlement, then immediately filed for guardianship to invalidate your signature. What do we do? First, stay calm. This changes our strategy, but not our advantage. Is Harold at home right now?" "No, he left for work about an hour ago." "Good. I need you to leave the house immediately. Pack an overnight bag and go somewhere Harold wouldn't think to look for you. A friend's house, a hotel, anywhere safe." Alarm coursed through me. "Leave my home. Why?" "Because the next step in their playbook will be to have you evaluated by their chosen doctor. Once the guardianship petition is filed, they can request an emergency evaluation. If Harold brings a doctor to your house claiming concern for your well-being, it could be very difficult for you to refuse." I thought of the carefully constructed narrative they had created: the confused, forgetful wife, the concerned husband, the supportive daughter-in-law. If I resisted a doctor's evaluation, it would only reinforce their story. "I understand," I said. "I'll go to my friend Estelle's house. Harold barely knows her." "Perfect. Go there now, and I'll meet you in 2 hours. Bring all your documentation, especially your journal and the recordings." I hung up and moved quickly, decades of emergency preparedness as a school principal kicking in. Within 20 minutes, I had packed essentials into a small suitcase, gathered my leather journal and the thumb drive containing all my evidence, and written a brief note for Harold saying I was visiting a friend for a few days to clear my head. As I backed my car out of the driveway, I looked at the house, my family's house for 3 generations, and wondered if I would ever return. The thought sent a chill through me, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't the end. This was just another move in the game Harold and Vanessa had started. Estelle Wilson lived in a small bungalow across town, in a neighborhood Harold would never visit. We'd taught together for 20 years, before both retiring, and she was one of the few people I trusted completely. When I arrived unannounced on her doorstep, suitcase in hand, she took one look at my face and pulled me inside. "Vivian Jackson, what in heaven's name is going on?" I sat at her kitchen table, accepted the sweet tea she pressed into my hands, and told her everything: the affair, the financial manipulation, the divorce, and now the guardianship petition. Estelle listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to outrage to grim determination. "That low-down, dirty snake," she said when I finished. "And that girl, I never did trust her with those designer clothes and that fake smile." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You stay right here as long as you need. That sorry excuse for a husband won't find you in my house." Tears pricked at my eyes, the first I'd allowed myself since discovering the affair. "Thank you, Estelle." "Don't you thank me. We teachers stick together." She stood and began pulling containers from her refrigerator. "Now I'm going to fix you a proper lunch while we wait for this lawyer of yours. Can't fight snakes on an empty stomach." Amara arrived precisely 2 hours later, briefcase in hand, her expression professionally composed, but with anger simmering beneath the surface. She joined us at Estelle's kitchen table, accepting a glass of tea with a grateful nod. "Mrs. Jackson, I've reviewed the guardianship petition. It's aggressive but not unexpected. They're moving faster than I anticipated, which tells me they're concerned about what you might know or what actions you might take. Can they really do this? I asked. Declare me incompetent based on nothing but their word. Not easily, no. The burden of proof is on them to demonstrate incapacity. But these cases can be complicated, especially when family members are aligned against you. She opened her briefcase and removed several documents. The good news is we filed our counterpetition in the divorce action yesterday afternoon. Harold will be served tomorrow morning, which will throw a significant wrench in their plans. How so? Our petition includes evidence of adultery and financial exploitation, which directly contradicts the narrative they're trying to build. If you're cognitively impaired, how did you manage to document their affair in such detail? How did you notice the financial irregularities? The two stories can't both be true. Relief washed through me. So what's our next step? We need our own medical evaluation immediately from a respected geriatric specialist with no connection to Harold or your regular doctor. I've already scheduled an appointment for tomorrow morning with Dr. Eleanor Chen at Emory. She's the head of geriatric medicine and frequently serves as an expert witness in capacity cases. And until then, you stay here where Harold can't find you. We need to assume they're moving quickly. Once Harold is served with our counterpetition tomorrow, he'll realize you know far more than he thought. That makes you dangerous to their plans. The gravity of the situation settled over me like a heavy blanket. I wasn't just fighting for my property or my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my very freedom. There's something else you should know, I said, pulling out my phone. My son Marcus texted me this morning. He wants to meet for lunch tomorrow. He says it's important. Amara frowned. Have you responded? Not yet. I don't know if I can trust him. He's married to Vanessa, after all. But he's also your son, Estelle interjected. And if anyone deserves to know what's happening, it's him. Amara considered this. Meeting him could be risky. If he's working with Harold and Vanessa, he could tell them where you are. I thought of Marcus, of the little boy who had once brought me wildflowers from the garden, of the young man who had stood proud at his college graduation, of the father who gazed at his son Elijah with such tenderness. Could he really be part of this cruel scheme? I need to see him, I decided. But not tomorrow. I'll text him and suggest the day after my evaluation with Dr. Chen, and I'll meet him somewhere public. Amara nodded reluctantly. That's reasonable. But be careful what you reveal. Until we know whose side he's on, treat everything as potentially getting back to Harold and Vanessa. I composed a brief text to Marcus. Can't do lunch tomorrow. How about Thursday at 1 p.m. Rosewood Cafe downtown? His reply came almost immediately. Thursday works. Everything okay, Mom? Dad said you left the house. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Finally, I typed, just needed some time to think. See you Thursday. That night, I slept fitfully in Estelle's guest room, dreams filled with faceless doctors declaring me incompetent with Harold and Vanessa moving into my home while I watched helplessly from outside, with my roses withering and dying under Vanessa's neglect. I woke before dawn, my heart racing, momentarily disoriented in the unfamiliar room. As reality settled back around me, I reached for my leather journal on the nightstand and wrote down everything that had happened the previous day, every detail I could remember about the guardianship petition, every emotion that had coursed through me. Writing calmed me, transformed fear and anger into clear, ordered thoughts. By the time Estelle knocked softly with a cup of coffee, I felt steadier, more focused. You ready for today, honey? She asked, setting the coffee beside me. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied. Dr. Chen's evaluation was thorough and exhaustive. For 3 hours, she tested every aspect of my cognitive function: memory, reasoning, language, spatial awareness, judgment. She reviewed my medical history, asked about my daily routines, inquired about my professional background and current activities. Through it all, I remained calm and focused, answering every question thoughtfully. This wasn't just a medical evaluation. It was my chance to establish an official record of my competence. When we finished, Dr. Chen smiled warmly. Mrs. Jackson, I've evaluated hundreds of patients for cognitive capacity. Based on today's assessment, I can state unequivocally that you show no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. In fact, your cognitive function is excellent for a person of any age. Relief flooded through me. Thank you, doctor. I'll prepare my full report for Ms. Johnson immediately. And Mrs. Jackson. Her expression grew serious. If anyone has suggested otherwise, they are either mistaken or deliberately misrepresenting your condition. Amara was waiting in the reception area, rising as I emerged from Dr. Chen's office. How did it go? Dr. Chen says I show no signs of cognitive impairment whatsoever. Amara's professional composure cracked briefly, revealing a genuine smile. Excellent. This report will be crucial for our case. She checked her watch. Harold should have been served with our counterpetition about 2 hours ago. I expect we'll be hearing from Bennett soon. As if on cue, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, then at me. Speak of the devil. It's Bennett's office. She stepped away to take the call, her voice dropping to a professional murmur. I sat in the waiting room watching through the window as Atlanta traffic flowed past people going about their normal lives, unaware of the battle being waged for mine. Amara returned a few minutes later, her expression grim but satisfied. Bennett wants an emergency meeting this afternoon. It seems Harold is quite disturbed by the contents of our counterpetition. I imagine finding out his wife knows about his affair with their daughter-in-law would be disturbing, I said dryly. Indeed. I've agreed to meet him at 4 today, but I told him you wouldn't be present. I cited concern about Harold's recent actions as the reason. What will happen at this meeting? Bennett will bluster and threaten. He'll try to intimidate me into withdrawing our petition. He'll probably offer a more generous settlement. Amara's eyes gleamed with determination. And I'll reject everything unless they withdraw the guardianship petition immediately and agree to our terms regarding the family property. Do you think they will? Not immediately, no, but this is just the opening salvo in the negotiation. The important thing is that they now know we're not the easy targets they thought we were. That afternoon, while Amara met with Bennett, I remained at Estelle's house, helping her prepare dinner as a small way to repay her hospitality. The familiar motions of chopping vegetables and stirring sauces soothed my frayed nerves, grounding me in ordinary tasks, while extraordinary events swirled around me. You know, Estelle said as she watched me expertly debone a chicken, in all the years I've known you, I've never seen you as fierce as you are now. Harold really doesn't know what he's up against. I smiled faintly. I'm not sure I knew myself. All these years I thought being a good wife meant supporting Harold managing the home-raising Marcus. I put aside the woman who ran a school, who made tough decisions, who stood her ground. She was never gone, Estelle said, just waiting for when you needed her most. My phone rang, Amara's number flashing on the screen. I wiped my hands and answered. Mrs. Jackson, the meeting with Bennett just concluded, she said without preamble. As expected, they initially rejected our terms. However, I believe we've made them nervous. Bennett kept emphasizing Harold's concern for your well-being, trying to paint the guardianship petition as an act of care rather than control. Did they withdraw it? Not yet, but they've agreed to reconsider if we scale back our demands in the divorce. I, of course, made no concessions. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. The most interesting development, however, is that Bennett mentioned your son Marcus several times. My heart stuttered. Marcus? How so? He suggested that Marcus is very concerned about you, that he supports his father's petition. I got the distinct impression they're planning to use him as a witness. Pain lanced through me. The thought of my own son testifying against me, helping Harold take away my autonomy, was almost unbearable. I see, I managed. Then tomorrow's lunch becomes even more important. Indeed, you need to find out where he stands. But Mrs. Jackson, her voice softened slightly, prepare yourself for the possibility that he may have sided with his father. After we hung up, I stood motionless in Estelle's kitchen, the half-prepared dinner forgotten. Marcus had always been closer to Harold than to me, following his father into real estate seeking his approval. But to participate in this scheme to help declare his own mother incompetent, I couldn't believe it. Bad news, Estelle asked gently. Bennett implied that Marcus is supporting Harold's guardianship petition. I said, my voice hollow. Estelle made a dismissive noise. That doesn't sound like the Marcus I know. That boy adores you. He adores his father too, and he's married to Vanessa. All the more reason to talk to him tomorrow. Give him a chance to explain before you assume the worst. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I lay awake in Estelle's guest room staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with Marcus over the past months, searching for signs I might have missed. Had he seemed more distant? Had there been strange comments, odd behaviors? Nothing specific came to mind, but then I had been blind to Harold's betrayal as well. Morning brought no clarity, only the grim determination to face whatever came next. I dressed carefully for my lunch with Marcus, choosing a tailored pantsuit and low heels professional rather than maternal. If he was indeed supporting Harold's petition, I wanted him to see not just his mother, but Vivian Jackson, former principal, a woman of competence and dignity. The Rosewood Cafe was busy when I arrived, the lunch crowd a mix of business people and tourists. I selected a table near the center of the room, visible from all angles. If this conversation went poorly, I wanted witnesses. Marcus arrived 5 minutes late, looking harried and tired. He spotted me immediately, weaving through the tables with long strides. As he drew closer, I studied his face, searching for clues to his allegiance, but saw only strain and what might have been concern. "Mom," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek before taking the seat opposite me. "I've been worried about you." "Dad said you just left without explanation." "I left a note," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I needed some time to think." "About the divorce, I know it must be a shock, but Dad says it's for the best, that you two have grown apart." So Harold hadn't told him about the guardianship petition. Interesting. "Marcus," I said carefully, "what exactly has your father told you about our situation?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Just that you and he have decided to separate, that it's amicable, that he's concerned about you living alone in that big house." "Has he mentioned Magnolia Gardens, the retirement community?" Marcus's brow furrowed. "No. Why would he? You love your home." He leaned forward. "Mom, what's going on? You seem different." I studied my son's face, the features so like his father's, but with my mother's eyes searching for any sign of deception. I saw only confusion and growing alarm. "Marcus," I said finally, "there's something you need to know. Something that will be painful to hear." I had just opened my mouth to continue when the cafe door opened and Vanessa walked in, her eyes scanning the room until she spotted us. Her face registered surprise, quickly masked with a smile as she approached our table. "Mom, Marcus, what a coincidence running into you both here." No coincidence at all, I thought, watching, as she bent to kiss Marcus's cheek before taking the empty chair beside him without invitation. "I was just downtown shopping and thought I'd grab lunch," she continued. "I'm so glad I ran into you, Mom. We've all been so worried. Dad said you needed some space after signing the divorce papers, but we didn't expect you to just disappear." The concern in her voice sounded genuine, but her eyes were calculating, watching my reaction carefully. I wondered if Harold had sent her to interrupt our conversation, afraid of what I might tell Marcus. "It's been a difficult time," I said noncommittally. "Of course it has," Vanessa said, reaching across to pat my hand. I resisted the urge to pull away. "That's why we're all so concerned. These big life changes can be overwhelming, especially at—" She paused delicately. "At my age," I finished for her. "Well, yes. Dad mentioned you've been a little confused lately. Forgetful. It happens to everyone, of course, but with the divorce and everything." Marcus was looking between us, his frown deepening. "What are you talking about, Vanessa? Mom isn't confused." A flicker of annoyance crossed Vanessa's face. "Marcus, honey, you haven't been around your parents as much as I have lately. I've noticed little things. Haven't you? Mom?" The trap was laid so carefully. If I denied her insinuations too vehemently, I would appear defensive, possibly irrational. If I acknowledged any normal lapses of memory, it would support their narrative. I chose a different path entirely. "Vanessa," I said calmly, "did Harold tell you he's filed a petition to become my legal guardian, claiming I'm mentally incompetent?" Marcus's head snapped toward me, shock written across his features. What? It's true. I was served with the papers 2 days ago. Your father is trying to have me declared incompetent so he can control all my assets and decisions. That's ridiculous, Marcus stammered, turning to Vanessa. Tell her that's ridiculous, Van. But Vanessa's expression had hardened, the mask of concern slipping. It's not ridiculous, Marcus. It's for her own protection. Your father is worried about her making poor financial decisions during this difficult time. Poor financial decisions like discovering he's been draining our joint accounts, I asked mildly, or like objecting to him transferring property out of my name. Marcus looked stunned. Dad's been doing what? Oh, Marcus, I said softly. There's so much you don't know. Vanessa stood abruptly. This isn't the place for this discussion. We should talk privately as a family. I agree, I said. In fact, I think it's time for complete honesty between all of us. I turned to my son. Marcus, there's something you need to know about your father and Vanessa. Vanessa's face drained of color. Mrs. Jackson, you're clearly upset and confused. Marcus, we should get your mother home where she can rest. But Marcus was staring at me, something dawning in his eyes. Mom, what about Dad and Vanessa? I held my son's gaze steadily. They've been having an affair, Marcus, for months, possibly longer. The words fell into silence. Around us, the cafe continued its normal lunch service, unaware of the earthquake rupturing our family at table 12. Marcus turned to Vanessa, his face ashen. Tell me that's not true. Her expression shifted rapidly, shock calculation, then a practiced look of concern. Marcus, honey, your mother is confused. This is exactly what we've been worried about. These delusions. I have proof, I interrupted quietly. Witnesses, recordings. Your own sister Jasmine saw them together at the Riverside Hotel. At the mention of Jasmine, something broke in Vanessa's composure. Jasmine needs to mind her own business, she snapped, then immediately tried to recover. I mean, whatever Jasmine thinks she saw, she's mistaken. Marcus stood suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need to see this proof. Now. Vanessa grabbed his arm. Marcus, you can't seriously believe this. Your mother needs help, not encouragement for these fantasies. He shook her off, his face hard with anger I had never seen before. My mother has never lied to me in my life. I can't say the same for you right now. He turned to me. Mom, where are you staying? I want to talk privately. I hesitated, conscious of Vanessa listening intently, despite her pretense of hurt outrage. I'll text you the address, I said finally. Come at 7 tonight, alone. As Marcus strode from the cafe without another word to either of us, Vanessa's careful mask dissolved completely. She leaned across the table, her voice low and venomous. You've made a serious mistake, Vivian. Harold and I were prepared to be generous to ensure you were comfortable. Now you'll get nothing. I met her gaze calmly. You never understood our family, Vanessa. You thought marrying Marcus was your path to wealth and status. Then you decided Harold was an even better target. But you overlooked something crucial. Oh, and what's that? She asked with a sneer. I gathered my purse and stood. The Jackson family has survived much worse than a scheming social climber and a weak man's midlife crisis. We endured slavery, Jim Crow redlining, and 100 other injustices to keep our land and our dignity. You really think I'm going to let you take it all without a fight? For once, Vanessa had no clever response. I left her sitting there staring after me with a mixture of shock and hatred that told me one thing clearly: the real battle was just beginning. As I drove back to Estelle's house after the confrontation with Vanessa, my hands were steady on the wheel, despite the storm raging within me. I had finally said aloud what I'd known for weeks: Harold and Vanessa were having an affair, and they had conspired to take everything from me. Most devastating of all, they had tried to use my own son against me. The look on Marcus's face when I revealed the truth haunted me. Shock, disbelief, then a terrible dawning understanding. No mother ever wants to deliver such pain to her child. Yet in this case, the truth, however brutal, was necessary. When I arrived at Estelle's bungalow, she was waiting anxiously on the porch. "Well," she demanded as soon as I stepped from the car, "how did it go?" "Marcus knows," I said simply. "He's coming here at 7 to talk." Inside, I called Amara to update her on the lunch confrontation. Her response was measured, but approving. "You forced their hand," she said. "Now that Marcus knows they can't use him as a witness against you. If anything, he may become our strongest ally." "If he believes me," I replied. "He's devastated, confused. Vanessa will undoubtedly try to convince him I'm delusional." "Then be ready to show him your evidence tonight," Amara advised. "The recordings, the financial documents, everything. Don't hold back." After we hung up, I spent the afternoon organizing my journal, the thumb drive with financial records, and the recordings I'd made of conversations with Vanessa. This would be the most important presentation of my life, not to a school board or parent committee, but to my only son. At precisely 7, there was a knock at Estelle's door. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and nodded to Estelle, who went to answer it. Marcus stood on the porch, his tall frame silhouetted against the evening sky. He looked exhausted. His normally immaculate appearance rumpled his eyes red-rimmed. When he saw me, he seemed to hesitate, as if suddenly unsure of himself. "Come in, Marcus," I said gently. Estelle tactfully excused herself to a neighbor's house, giving us privacy. Marcus entered slowly, looking around the modest living room before settling awkwardly on the edge of the sofa. "I've been trying to reach Dad all afternoon," he said without preamble. "He's not answering his calls. And Vanessa—" His voice caught. "Vanessa came home, packed a bag and left. Said she needed space to think. When I asked her directly if what you said was true, she just started crying and said you were trying to destroy our family." My heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry, Marcus." "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are they really?" "Yes," I said simply. "I have proof. Would you like to see it?" He nodded, his jaw tight. For the next hour, I laid out the evidence piece by piece. The recorded lunch conversation with Vanessa, where she pushed for me to enter Magnolia Gardens. The financial documents showing Harold's systematic draining of our accounts. The guardianship petition declaring me mentally incompetent. And finally, Jasmine's sworn statement describing multiple encounters between Harold and Vanessa at the Riverside Hotel. Marcus listened in silence, his expression growing harder with each new revelation. When I played the recording of Vanessa suggesting I was becoming forgetful and confused, he buried his face in his hands. "How long?" he asked finally. "I don't know for certain. I first saw them together the night of our anniversary party about a month ago, but according to Jasmine, it's been going on for at least 6 months." Marcus looked up sharply. "The anniversary party. What happened?" I hesitated, reluctant to deliver another painful blow, but he deserved the whole truth. "I found them kissing in our bedroom. Vanessa saw me watching. She knew exactly what she was doing." Marcus surged to his feet, pacing the small room like a caged animal. All this time I've been working alongside Dad, bringing Vanessa to family dinners, letting Elijah spend weekends with his grandparents." He stopped suddenly. "Elijah. Oh God, Mom, what am I going to tell Elijah?" "Nothing yet," I said firmly. "He's 5 years old. He doesn't need to know any of this adult business. What he needs is stability and love, which you will continue to provide." "How?" Marcus demanded. "How do I provide stability when my marriage is a sham and my father is—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "One day at a time," I said. "That's how I've been managing since I found out. One decision, one action, one breath at a time." Marcus sank back onto the sofa, suddenly looking very young and lost. "I don't know what to do, Mom." I moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in mine. "You don't have to decide everything tonight, but there are some things I need to know. Did you have any idea about the guardianship petition? Were you planning to testify that I was incompetent?" Horror crossed his face. "What? No, Dad never mentioned anything about guardianship. He told me the divorce was amicable, that you were both ready to move on. He said he was concerned about you living alone, but that was all." He gripped my hand tightly. "Mom, I would never ever say you were incompetent. You're the most capable person I know." Relief washed through me. Whatever else had happened, I hadn't lost my son. "Thank you for believing me," I said softly. "I should have seen it," he muttered. "The signs were all there. Vanessa volunteering to drop by and check on you. Dad's sudden interest in your health. The whispered phone calls, the unexplained absences. He looked up, his eyes tortured. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have protected you. This isn't your fault, Marcus. They deceived all of us. We talked late into the night, filling in the gaps in each other's knowledge. Marcus revealed that Harold had been making odd decisions at the real estate company, selling properties below market value to quick buyers taking on unusual debt. Now those actions made sense. Harold had been liquidating assets, preparing for his new life with Vanessa. What happens now? Marcus asked as midnight approached. Tomorrow morning, Amara will file our response to the guardianship petition, including Dr. Chen's evaluation, proving I'm fully competent. We'll also request an emergency hearing about the financial exploitation. I want to testify, Marcus said firmly, as a witness for you. I studied my son's face, seeing in it the determination that had always reminded me of my father. Are you sure it would mean publicly standing against your father? He stopped being my father the moment he betrayed you and tried to steal your home. Marcus said, his voice hard. The Jackson property belongs to you. It's our family legacy. I felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly overwhelmed me. Despite everything, I had raised a son who understood what truly mattered, not money or status, but family honor and truth. When Marcus left shortly after midnight, we embraced tightly. I'll come by tomorrow afternoon, he promised. And Mom, I'm moving out of the house. I can't stay there knowing what they've done. Where will you go? What about Elijah? We'll stay with my friend David temporarily. I've already arranged for Elijah to visit his other grandmother tomorrow so I can pack our things. I watched him drive away, this grown man who had once been my baby, now facing the collapse of his marriage and his relationship with his father. Yet even in crisis, he was thinking clearly, planning carefully. He was, I realized with a mixture of sadness and pride, very much my son. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Amara called early with news. We've filed our response to the guardianship petition with Dr. Chen's evaluation attached. We've also requested an emergency hearing regarding the financial exploitation and fraudulent document concerns. How soon will the hearing be? That's the good news. Judge Watkins has agreed to see us this afternoon at 2. She's familiar with elder exploitation cases and takes them very seriously. My pulse quickened. That's remarkably fast. It is. I think our evidence is compelling enough that the court wants to address it immediately. And Mrs. Jackson, your son called my office this morning. He's provided a sworn statement about his father's financial activities at the company and confirmed he had no knowledge of the guardianship petition. Relief flooded through me. Marcus had wasted no time in taking action. There's one more thing, Amara continued, her voice taking on an edge of satisfaction. I received a call from James Bennett. It seems Harold is suddenly very interested in negotiation. What kind of negotiation? He's offering to withdraw the guardianship petition in exchange for a more equitable division of assets in the divorce. I laughed softly without humor. In other words, now that he knows I'm not as helpless as he thought, he's willing to settle for merely taking half of what's mine instead of everything. Precisely. I told him we'd consider his offer after today's hearing. I spent the morning with Estelle, trying to stay calm by helping her with household chores. The normality of folding laundry and washing dishes was soothing, a counterpoint to the legal drama unfolding around me. What will you wear to court? Estelle asked, as we hung sheets on the line in her small backyard. I hadn't even considered it. I don't know. Something dignified, I suppose. Estelle shook her head firmly. No, honey. Something powerful. You're not going as a victim or a supplicant. You're going as Vivian Jackson, claiming what's rightfully yours. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a garment bag. I've been saving this for a special occasion, but I think you need it more than I do. Inside was a stunning sapphire blue dress suit, the kind that commands attention without being flashy. Estelle, I couldn't possibly. You can and you will, she insisted. You need armor today, and there's nothing more powerful than a black woman in blue. At 1:30, dressed in Estelle's suit, with my hair freshly arranged, I met Amara outside the courthouse. She looked me over with approval. Perfect. You look exactly like what you are, a dignified, competent woman who has been wronged. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal. Marcus was already seated in the front row, and he stood as I entered, his face tight with concern. I squeezed his hand in reassurance before taking my place beside Amara at the plaintiff's table. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and Harold entered with James Bennett. I hadn't seen Harold in days, and the change shocked me. He looked haggard, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, his eyes darting nervously around the room. When he saw Marcus sitting behind me, he visibly flinched. "All rise," called the bailiff, as Judge Watkins entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with close-cropped silver hair. "Be seated," she said briskly, opening the file before her. "We're here for an emergency hearing regarding Jackson v. Sullivan petition for injunctive relief against financial exploitation and fraudulent guardianship claims." She peered over her reading glasses at each table. "I've reviewed the filings from both sides. This is a most disturbing case." Bennett rose smoothly. "Your Honor, my client is deeply concerned about his wife's well-being. Any financial actions he's taken have been solely to protect their joint assets during a difficult transition." Judge Watkins fixed him with a penetrating stare. "Mr. Bennett, I've reviewed the medical evaluation from Dr. Eleanor Chen, one of the most respected geriatric specialists in the Southeast. She finds Mrs. Jackson not only competent, but exceptionally sharp. Yet your client filed a guardianship petition claiming severe cognitive impairment based on, she consulted the papers, observations from himself and Mrs. Jackson's daughter-in-law, neither of whom has medical training." She set the papers down. "I find that curious, don't you?" Bennett shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, my client was acting on genuine concern." "Save it," Judge Watkins interrupted. "I've been on this bench for 20 years, Mr. Bennett. I know elder exploitation when I see it." She turned to Amara. "Ms. Johnson, present your evidence regarding the financial matters." For the next hour, Amara methodically presented our case: the systematic draining of joint accounts, the transfer of property deeds, the fraudulent signature authorizations. She played the recording of my lunch with Vanessa, where the push for Magnolia Gardens was clearly evident. She entered into evidence Dr. Chen's comprehensive evaluation, confirming my cognitive health. Throughout it all, I sat with my back straight, eyes forward, the very picture of competence and dignity. Occasionally, I glanced at Harold, who seemed to shrink further into himself with each new piece of evidence. Finally, Judge Watkins called Marcus to testify. He approached the witness stand, was sworn in, and began describing the financial irregularities he had discovered at the family business. "In the past 3 months, my father sold 4 commercial properties well below market value to cash buyers. The proceeds were transferred to accounts I had no access to, despite being a partner in the business." Marcus's voice was steady, professional, though I could hear the underlying pain. "When I questioned these decisions, I was told they were strategic moves to position the company for expansion." "And what do you believe now?" Amara asked. "I believe my father was liquidating assets in preparation for divorce, hiding the proceeds to prevent my mother from receiving her fair share." Bennett objected, claiming speculation, but Judge Watkins overruled him. "The witness is a partner in the business and qualified to assess financial patterns." "Mr. Sullivan," Judge Watkins addressed Marcus, "were you aware of your father's guardianship petition regarding your mother?" "No, Your Honor. I was told the divorce was amicable. The first I heard of any guardianship petition was yesterday from my mother. And having spent time with your mother recently, what is your assessment of her cognitive function?" Marcus looked directly at me, his eyes clear and certain. "My mother is the same sharp, intelligent woman she's always been. There is absolutely nothing wrong with her mind." When Marcus stepped down, Judge Watkins called a brief recess. As she left the courtroom, Harold approached our table, ignoring Amara's warning glance. "Vivian," he said, his voice low and urgent, "can we talk just for a minute?" I regarded him coolly. "I believe your attorney advised against that, Harold." "Please, this has gotten out of hand. You never meant for me to find out," I interrupted, keeping my voice calm. "You never meant for Marcus to discover the truth. You never meant for a judge to see through your guardianship scheme. Which part exactly didn't you mean, Harold?" He flinched as if struck. Vivian, we've been married for 45 years. Doesn't that count for anything? I looked at this man I had once loved, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and felt nothing but a distant sadness. It counted for everything, Harold. That's why your betrayal is unforgivable. Mom, Marcus said, stepping between us. Dad, I think you should go back to your table. Harold stared at our son, as if seeing him for the first time. Marcus, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Marcus cut him off. I've seen the evidence. I know what you and Vanessa did. His voice broke slightly on her name. What I don't understand is how you could do this to Mom, to our family. Harold seemed to deflate all pretense of dignity, abandoned. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. He muttered more to himself than to us. Return to your seat, Mr. Sullivan, Amara said firmly. The judge is returning. When Judge Watkins resumed the bench, her expression was grave. Having reviewed the evidence presented today, I find clear and compelling reason to believe that financial exploitation has occurred. I am therefore granting the requested injunction, freezing all assets held jointly by Vivian and Harold Sullivan or transferred from joint ownership within the past 6 months. She turned her stern gaze to Harold. Furthermore, I am dismissing the guardianship petition as without merit and potentially filed in bad faith. Mr. Sullivan, I strongly suggest you instruct your attorney to negotiate a fair settlement in the divorce proceedings, or you may find yourself facing criminal charges for financial exploitation of an elder. Bennett immediately stood. Your Honor, we are prepared to withdraw the guardianship petition immediately and enter good faith negotiations regarding the divorce settlement. I should hope so, Judge Watkins replied dryly. Ms. Johnson, your client's petition for injunctive relief is granted. The court will appoint a forensic accountant to trace all funds removed from joint accounts. Mr. Sullivan will bear the cost of this investigation. She struck her gavel once. Court is adjourned. The rush of emotions I felt was overwhelming relief, vindication, but also a profound sadness for what had been lost. My marriage was truly over-destroyed, not by drifting apart or mutual unhappiness, but by calculated betrayal. Outside the courtroom, Marcus put his arm around my shoulders. You did it, Mom. We did it, I corrected him. I couldn't have faced this without you. Amara joined us, satisfaction evident in her usually composed features. This is just the beginning, Mrs. Jackson. The forensic accounting will likely uncover more evidence of financial misconduct, and with the guardianship petition dismissed, we're in an excellent position to reclaim everything that's rightfully yours. What about my father's business? Marcus asked. I'm still a partner. Given the evidence of mismanagement and potential fraud, you have grounds to request a receivership, Amara explained. That would protect the business assets while the legal issues are resolved. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I need to do that immediately, for Elijah's sake, if nothing else. As we walked toward the parking lot, my phone rang. The screen showed a name I hadn't expected, Jasmine Lewis. Hello, Jasmine. Mrs. Jackson. Her voice was hesitant. I heard about the court hearing today. Is it true the judge dismissed the guardianship petition? Yes, it's true. How did you hear about it so quickly? Vanessa called me. There was a pause. She's staying at my apartment. She showed up last night crying, saying you were trying to destroy her marriage with lies. I sighed. Jasmine, you know that's not true. You saw them together yourself. I know. Her voice strengthened. That's why I'm calling. Vanessa doesn't know I testified for you, and I think she's planning something. Alarm prickled along my spine. What do you mean? She's been making calls all morning talking about securing what's rightfully hers before you can steal everything. I heard her tell someone she was going to the house to get some things while everyone was at court. The Jackson house. My house. Yes, she has keys. Marcus gave them to her years ago. I thanked Jasmine and quickly relayed the information to Amara and Marcus. We need to go there now, Marcus said urgently. The family heirlooms, the deed's grandmother's jewelry, it's all in the house. Amara nodded. I'll call the police and meet you there. With the court order in hand, we have legal grounds to prevent any removal of property. The drive to my home, the Jackson family home, was tense. Marcus insisted on driving me in his car, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I can't believe she would steal from you," he kept saying. "How could I have been so blind?" "Love makes us blind," I said gently. "You wanted to believe in her goodness." As we turned onto our street, we saw Vanessa's red sports car in the driveway. Behind it was a small moving van, its rear doors open. "They're actually looting the house," Marcus whispered, horror in his voice. We pulled up just as two men emerged from the front door carrying my grandmother's antique writing desk, the one that had survived the Tulsa massacre, passed down through generations of Jackson women. "Stop right there," Marcus shouted, leaping from the car. The men hesitated, looking to Vanessa, who appeared in the doorway, her arms filled with what looked like photo albums. She froze when she saw us. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," he replied coldly. "This is my mother's home. You have no right to remove anything." Vanessa's expression hardened. "This is Harold's house, too. He asked me to collect some personal items while he deals with the legal nonsense." I stepped forward, my voice steady. "That's not true, Vanessa. This house belongs to the Jackson Family Trust. It was never Harold's to give or take." "You're confused again, Mom," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false concern. "This property is part of the marital assets. Harold's lawyer confirmed it." "No, it is not," said Amara, walking up the driveway, a police officer beside her. "As Mrs. Jackson's attorney, I can confirm that this property belongs solely to the Jackson Family Trust, which specifically excludes spouses. Furthermore, I have a court order preventing removal of any property pending the financial investigation." The officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'll need to see some identification, and I'll need those men to return that furniture to the house immediately." Vanessa's face contorted with rage. "This is ridiculous. You can't just change the rules because you don't like the outcome, Vivian." "I'm not changing anything," I replied calmly. "The trust was established by my father 50 years ago. Its terms have always been clear." As the movers reluctantly carried my grandmother's desk back inside, Vanessa turned to Marcus, her voice suddenly plaintive. "Marcus, honey, you can't let them do this. Think about Elijah. Think about our future." Marcus stared at her, as if seeing a stranger. "Our future? You've been sleeping with my father, Vanessa. You plotted to have my mother declared incompetent. What kind of future did you imagine we would have after that?" "It wasn't like that," she protested. "Harold pursued me. He was lonely. He said you and Vivian never appreciated either of us. We found comfort in each other." I watched my son's face, seeing the last vestiges of love for this woman drain away, replaced by cold clarity. "I want you out of my house by tomorrow," he said quietly. "Leave your keys. Anything you need for Elijah, coordinate through my lawyer." "You can't take my son from me," Vanessa hissed. "I would never keep Elijah from his mother." Marcus replied, his voice steady. "But I will protect him from your lies and manipulation. We'll arrange proper custody through the courts." While this confrontation unfolded, I walked past them into my home. Inside, evidence of Vanessa's hasty pillaging was everywhere, drawers left open, cabinets emptied, picture frames removed from walls. I moved through the rooms, cataloging what appeared to be missing feeling, violated yet strangely detached. In my bedroom, the antique jewelry box that had belonged to my mother stood open and empty. The pearls she had worn on her wedding day, the garnet brooch from my grandmother, the simple gold locket with pictures of my parents all gone. "The jewelry is missing," I told the officer who had followed me inside. He nodded grimly. "We'll need a complete inventory of what was taken," and I'd advised changing the locks immediately. By evening, the police had documented the theft, the movers had been questioned and released, and Vanessa had been escorted from the property, screeching threats of lawsuits all the way to her car. A locksmith had changed every lock in the house, and Marcus and I sat exhausted in the kitchen, cups of tea growing cold before us. "I'll stay here tonight," Marcus said. "I don't want you alone in case they try to come back." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you, son." "I'm so sorry, Mom, for all of this. It's not your fault. I brought her into our family. I gave her access to our home, our lives. You loved her," I said simply. "Love requires trust. She and your father betrayed that trust, not you." Marcus's phone had been buzzing periodically throughout the evening. Now he glanced at it and grimaced. "Dad again. 15 missed calls." "You should talk to him eventually," I said. "Not tonight, but sometime. He's still your father." Marcus shook his head. "I don't know if I can ever forgive him for this." "Forgiveness isn't something you do for the other person," I said quietly. "It's what you do for yourself to release the burden of hatred. It doesn't mean you forget or that you allow them back into your life." "How can you be so calm about all this, so philosophical?" Marcus asked, genuine wonder in his voice. I considered the question. "I suppose because I've already done my grieving. From the moment I saw them together at the anniversary party, I began mourning our marriage, the life I thought we had. What I feel now isn't the sharp pain of fresh betrayal, but the quieter ache of acceptance." Later that night, alone in my bedroom with new locks securing my home, I opened my leather journal for the first time in days. So much had happened since my last entry: the guardianship petition, Marcus learning the truth, the court hearing Vanessa's attempted theft. I wrote it all down, every detail, every emotion. Not as evidence anymore, but as testimony. A record of how a woman in her 60s, underestimated and nearly discarded, had found the strength to reclaim her life. When I finished writing, I went to the window and looked out at my rose garden silvered by moonlight. The bushes needed pruning, the beds weeding after my absence. Tomorrow I would tend them, my hands in the soil. My grandfather had bought, my grandmother had nurtured, my mother had protected, and I had inherited. Some of the older blooms had withered in my absence, their petals scattered on the ground. But new buds were forming tight with promise, waiting for their moment to unfurl. I thought of what my father had taught me all those years ago, that the most beautiful roses grow among the sharpest thorns. 6 months later, on a warm spring afternoon, I stood in that same garden watching as guests mingled on the lawn, glasses of lemonade in hand. The Jackson family home was hosting its first garden showcase since the divorce, and every rosebush was in glorious bloom. The legal battles had been largely resolved. Harold had finally agreed to a settlement that acknowledged the Jackson family trust's ownership of the property and returned all misappropriated funds. The forensic accountant had traced most of the missing money, though some had been spent on Vanessa's extravagant lifestyle and could not be recovered. Harold had left Atlanta, moving to Florida, where rumor had it he had taken a position with a small real estate firm. Vanessa had fought for full custody of Elijah, but settled for generous visitation rights when her affair with Harold became part of the public record. She, too, had left town, returning to her hometown in North Carolina. Marcus and Elijah had moved into the carriage house on my property, an arrangement that benefited us all. Elijah had the stability of remaining close to his school and friends. Marcus had time to rebuild his life while restoring the family business, and I had the joy of daily interaction with my son and grandson. As for me, the experience had transformed me in ways I never expected. After the divorce was finalized, I reclaimed my maiden name, becoming Vivian Jackson once again. I joined the board of a local nonprofit focused on preventing elder exploitation, sharing my story to help others recognize the warning signs. Most significantly, I had converted the downtown condo Harold had offered in the original settlement, and which the court had awarded to me instead, into a transitional home for older women recovering from financial exploitation or domestic abuse. We called it the Rose House, and already it had helped 6 women rebuild their lives. "Quite a turnout," said Estelle, joining me by the rose trellis. "Your Jackson crimsons are the talk of the garden club." I smiled, looking at the deep red blooms that had been nurtured by generations of Jackson women. "They're survivors. Even when cut back to the root, they find a way to bloom again." Estelle squeezed my arm affectionately. "Just like their gardener." Across the lawn, I saw Marcus laughing with Jasmine Lewis, who had become a surprising friend to our family after her brave testimony against her own sister. Nearby, Elijah was showing his prized collection of rocks to some indulgent garden club members. Life had taken a path I never could have imagined a year ago. The betrayal had been devastating, the legal battle exhausting. Yet standing in my garden surrounded by friends and family, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. I had lost a husband but found myself. I had been betrayed but discovered new allies. I had been underestimated but proven my strength. At 66, when Harold and Vanessa thought I would quietly fade away, I had instead bloomed anew. Like the roses my family had tended for generations, I had endured the sharp thorns of betrayal and emerged stronger, more vibrant, more authentically myself. This was not the end I had expected for my story. It was, I realized with quiet satisfaction, a far better beginning.